All right. Hello, everyone. This is Humera Fasihuddin standing in for Tara Rahmani for the series Life's Not Linear here at Real Industry. And today we're here with Gregory Wilson. And I go ways back with Gregory let's see, I want to say it was 2012.
12. Yeah.
It was 2012. It
Yep.
was the first year that I launched the University Innovation Fellows Program with Leticia, and you were one of the original gangsters, the OGs in the community, as we like to refer to them. Greg, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'd love to start by having you give a little introduction to yourself, a little bit about your background, like where you're originally from, and your sort of how that led to your college career.
Sure.
Oh, your sound is out. I heard you, and then I heard some static, and then.
How about now?
That works.
Okay, perfect. So I was originally born in Detroit, Michigan, but I moved to Atlanta, Georgia in '97, so in 7th grade. I sort of grew up loving computers and knowing that I would do something with computers despite going to a performing arts school for high school. I knew I wanted to do something with computers. Initially, I thought it would be computer engineering. That's actually what I started as in college. So when I graduated from high school, I really wanted to go to Georgia Tech, but I didn't get in initially. So I went to Savannah State, HBCU, but did a Georgia Tech program there. So it's like you have Georgia Tech professors, and sometimes you remote into classes at Georgia Tech, but you're there in Savannah, and you take some classes you take at Savannah State as well. So I did that for 2 years, doing computer engineering. And then I took a course called signal processing, which was one of the hardest courses I had ever taken. And I started to think, well, maybe, computer engineering is not for me. Maybe I think I like the software side of things better. So I did a direct transfer into Georgia Tech at the Atlanta campus, as a computer science major. And that first year, I kind of got introduced to research through Thad Snyder, who's a professor there, who's known for wearable computers. And I just fell in love with wearable computers and with the whole research and how you can help people through research, how you can use technology to help people. And then from there, I was kind of sold on the whole, research and kind of path to a Ph.D. I sort of became a professional student at that point. So after graduating from Georgia Tech, I took a year and a half off because, Georgia Tech is very hard and very stressful to work, but I always knew I was going to go back. And so I did my master's at Virginia Tech. Again in computer science, but along the way, I worked on a project where I had to create educational card games for kids. And so while doing it, I started to think, well, these games and these ideas that we were coming up with, how do we know that they're actually effective for learning? Like, we got the technology down packed, but like, how do we know this will actually be useful? And so I started taking education classes. I went across the drill field at Virginia Tech to the College of Education and started taking, instructional design and learning theories and different courses like that, and just really enjoyed it and really enjoyed the people as well. It was a lot more diverse than, the computer science department. And so when I was at Virginia Tech, the idea was that I would just get my PhD in computer science at Virginia Tech. But I decided instead to just get my master's and then kind of, for my PhD, do something related to education or learning design. And so after that, and I moved again. There's a lot of moving in my story, moving a lot. I went back to Georgia, but this time the University of Georgia, to get my PhD in it's called Learning Design and Technology. And then there, I was there in 2012, and so that's also when I became a fellow. Got introduced to design thinking. Got introduced to being a change agent. Here's how, again, you can use design now to help people, to help have an impact. And so I knew that now I want to use design, I want to use technology, but also to have an impact in the field of education. And that sort of has been guiding my career path ever since.
So, and that's a lot of twists and turns. Aside from the moves, you sort of imagined computer engineering, and then discovered computer science. From computer science, discovered education. And I would, there are some people who would be like, if I imagine that there are some people who have to justify to family members, like, no, I know I said this, but I really meant this. And like, wait, for the last time, I'm not, how did you
Right.
balance that? How did you know that it was right for you to make that switch rather than lean into the field that you were in at that moment? And what kind of communication or selling did you have to do to family members and others who supported you to be like, no, I think this is the right shift for me?
Right. The good thing, my parents were always supportive and always, encouraging me as I kind of moved through my, as long as I finished, they were fine, with what I decided. And I never knew exactly if I was making the right decision, but it just, it may, I never wanted to have any regrets. I never wanted to look back and say, I should have made this change, or I should have went in this direction. um, Back then, especially when I was getting my master's, that was, between 2009 to 2011. So I was still single, no children, not married. So I think I could make, I had the opportunity then to make that change. I got married in 2011, and then it was sort of like, okay, I need to focus. I need to pick something. I need to do it. I need to finish. I need to figure out, what my career is going to be. But back then, when I made that switch, I didn't know if it was the right decision. But I just really felt passionate about. I started to feel passionate about education at that point, and helping people to learn, helping using technology to learn. I also was volunteering in schools at the time, and I really felt that these emerging technologies that we were starting to discover could be really useful in helping to change education. So but I felt like I needed that. I need to know more about learning, more about education in order to help make that change. I couldn't just be someone who knows all about technology and comes in and say, hey, you should do this, this, and this, but I should also be able to have that knowledge of learning theories and instructional design, so that I can then speak an educator's language, so to speak, which I think helps change happen faster.
That's pretty awesome. So you go deep in education, and then what was the goal coming out of your PhD program? What did you want to? What did you do then?
Right. So I got my dissertation, or I did my dissertation, completed my dissertation, and I graduated July 2015. And I really didn't know exactly what I want to do. So generally, when you're PhD, your path is, you do a postdoc, you do some more research, and then you eventually become a professor. Or if you're lucky, you can kind of skip a postdoc and just go straight into being a professor. But one of the things that I guess I don't want to say bothered me, but one of the things I didn't really want my career to be about is publishing. The whole publish or perish kind of mindset that you have to have as a professor a lot of the times. And I knew I liked research, but I wanted to also do something that was hands-on, especially after doing the university innovation fellowship. I just really wanted to be like someone who's hands-on, someone who's like a problem solver, someone who could use design thinking and technology to to um, to produce some sort of change. And so I kind of I kind of bucked that tradition, which kind of left me a little kind of out there by myself, so to speak. So it took me actually 6 months to actually find my first job. So I didn't get my first job until January. And I was sort of looking back at sort of my job hunt just recently because I kept a lot of notes. And like in that time, I applied to over 100 jobs, about 117 jobs, I think to be exact. And it was like a wide range of places, from of course, I wanted Stanford or places in California, Google, or IDEO, to the Orlando Magic. They had a director of innovation job, to MIT, to Porsche, the car company. And I got a lot of interviews, a lot of second interviews as well, but never could quite you know secure a position. A lot of times it was, we really like you, but you don't have enough experience, or we can't see you in this particular position. Generally, they would say due to the lack of experience. So that kind of was the thing that hurt me, I guess, in that job search, because I could have easily, I think, maybe gotten a postdoc somewhere and kind of went on that traditional path. But because I wanted to do something more hands-on and wanted to kind of blaze this different path, I sort of had trouble in the beginning kind of securing that first position.
I feel like I should say that I'm sorry. I mean, you did some pretty amazing things, and we haven't defined in this series what UIF is, but UIF stands for University Innovation Fellows. And Greg, you discovered that was a thing, that students could change the educational environment and create new assets and learning opportunities. And you were at
Hmm.
University of Georgia at the time, and you did some pretty cool things. And it's kind of a bummer to me to see that you taking a leadership role and changing education, being someone who actually made things happen from the ground up at a time at University of Georgia when there was nothing, that
Hmm.
wasn't rewarded. That really bums me out. And I kind of like, I felt bad for you at the time. Um, I think it was because it was also in parallel with the 2016 Black Lives Matter movement. And it had just, I think it was like just getting started. And you had a lot of academic institutions asking the question, well, what are we doing? And how is
Hmm.
our faculty mirroring the student population we wish to serve? And how are we addressing these issues? And yet on the other hand, that they weren't like giving you the tenure track position that you deserved, in my view.
Hmm.
Um, Sorry, rant over.
Right.
Right, I will rant for you there. Anything you want to add to that before you tell us where you did land?
Right. Yeah, definitely. It was discouraging, I would say. A lot of times I would see, I would always keep track of, okay, I didn't get this position, who did, and try to figure out why. And then, some instances, oh, it's obvious. Yeah, I would have made that decision too, to hire that person over me. But then other times, at least in my opinion, I wouldn't. And so I had to kind of deal with that of like, what am I missing? Is it really just experience? What is it, that of why I couldn't get hired? But
Hiring bias.
right. Or whatever it is, of
Right.
course, like if especially when people would say, oh, they couldn't see you in this position, well, if you've never had a black person in this position, well, that might be why you can't see someone like me in that position. But the kind of tough thing is you never know what the issue is, and so I tend to look inwardly. So like, it's something about me, or I need to get better, which I think can be healthy as well. But it definitely can create a lot of self doubt, which I definitely went through in that 6 months.
I'm sorry that you went through that, and I'm glad you overcame that. So let's talk about the position that you did land, and that I think that brings you to my original home state of New York. Tell us about that.
Well, not quite there yet. So
Oh,
actually, in January, things started to pick up because I did start applying for postdocs. So I was like, okay, I haven't gotten this leadership position or this director of innovation position or whatever, that I was searching for. Let me try, because by then I had my first child. My wife was working. I need to do something. So I started applying for postdocs while still kind of doing the director of innovation, those type positions. So in January, I actually got I think it was 3 offers. One was a postdoc in Ohio State that would have actually led to a tenure track position. The other one was a postdoc at Kettering University, which is in Flint, Michigan,
yeah.
which I did a summer program for there years ago in high school. And then the third one was a learning experience designer position at Singularity University, which is in Mountain View, California. And me, I wanted to live in California, love California, love the Silicon Valley area. So it's like I had this kind of 2 paths to take. Okay, do I take the traditional path, the safe path of just doing a postdoc at Ohio State, becoming a professor, the end at least, or taking this kind of not quite um, secure, as a contractor position at first, position at Singularity University. They really liked a lot of the ideas I had. I felt like I would have more control over what I would do. Similar to more hands-on. So I kind of was at that path of which kind of which direction do I take, and I did decide to take the Singularity University position. And I think while I wasn't at that position long, maybe about 7 months, but doing that and starting to create my own type of projects and initiatives, that's what then led me to finally getting the director of the innovation lab at Ross School in New York. And then once I took that position, then I guess you could say my career took off, so to speak.
I totally forgot about those pivots, which in a sense they kept you active, they kept you moving, and they opened doors. And so that's right. So tell us about the Ross School, and tell us about the blossoming of your career from that point forward.
Right. So Ross School is a boarding school in East Hampton, New York. And they had this innovation lab that they started that was like a separate program within the school that you had to apply to. But once in, you then took, I forget how they did it at the time because I completely redesigned it. But it was like you could take these courses, take technology courses or art courses, and you work on innovation type projects. But the thing that really spoke to me is that I had the opportunity to redesign the lab how I wanted. It's kind of like I was given this sandbox, so to speak, to do whatever I wanted. I got a nice budget to do it, which I'm learning for me is like where I can really thrive when I have that open box, I'm just given the confidence to create, and I'm not micromanaged. It's like, oh, we need you to do this, need you to do this. I think that's where I really thrive. And so I was able to redesign the innovation lab into a place where people want it to be. I focus a lot on getting more girls in the lab, because and making the girls feel more comfortable, because like there was issues where like a lot of them didn't even were allowed to like touch the 3D printer or weren't allowed to like play with a lot of the tools that were in the lab. So I kind of changed the culture in that aspect and made Innovation Lab kind of on par with the tennis academy that they have, which is very, highly ranked and people want to do. Designed kind of three types of spaces. You have your future tech space in one room, you have your kind of traditional maker space in another room, and then you have your traditional classroom in another room. I kind of pulled together, because the Innovation Lab was sort of just very tech heavy, so I pulled in the teachers that ran the woodworking space, the metal space, the media lab, and we like created this different type of program where it really wasn't about classes. Oh, I'm going to take the woodworking class or the metalworking class and then the programming class, but really modules where it's like, okay, you're going to learn how to design a logo, and this teacher is going to help you learn how to design a logo. It's a 2 to 3 project. Or, okay, now you're going to do this woodworking project, and then you're going to put it all together to do this design project at the end, where you're going to have to pitch to everyone. We did I tried out round tables where every week you would have to give an update on where you were with your project and get feedback from other students and from other professors who were involved in the lab. And so I think having that ability to kind of create and do that, really I started to get noticed by other companies and other places. So I got the opportunity to design a summer camp where wrote the curriculum. Here's what they should learn. Here's how to put that together. I got a chance to do like a weekend program for younger kids, 7 to 12, at a co-working space out in the Hamptons, where I not only was designing curriculum, but was also doing this. Was my first chance to work with younger kids as well. And then I got so good because I got to the point to where I felt like the Innovation Lab shouldn't be just for a select few students, and that it should be open for everyone. You shouldn't have to pay extra to have this sort of experience, It really should just be for whoever is passionate about, whoever wants to do it. So then I redesigned the Innovation Lab and sort of, you could say, designed myself out of a job, but it was good because and now instead of them having an innovation lab, they have a innovation certificate where anyone can go and do this experience, and then they get a degree, but then they also get this innovation certificate because they did these requirements and things that I kind of helped set. So although I felt a need to have a director of an innovation lab there, once they kind of made that change, I still am glad I made the change, and am glad that now that sort of experience is open to more people.
Well, I mean, in a sense, you democratized access to the tools that are shaping our society. And
Right.
if all students aren't conversant in that, then shame on us. And as you're talking about it, I'm secretly wanting this for all 3 of my kids, all different ages. And so what a really great experience, and just so needed across the board. And by the way, for those who don't know the Hamptons, I mean, who hasn't heard of the Hamptons, but the Hamptons are the expensive Hamptons in Long Island, suburb of New York City, where a lot of wealthy people, mostly white, live. So you're there, and you've got some options about places you can go. How did you make that change, and what did you switch to?
Right. So once I designed myself out of a job, again, it was, how can I now affect an entire school with innovation rather than creating kind of a closed off program? And then how can I do it for a more diverse set of students? And Chicago, is one of a very diverse place, the 3rd biggest city in the United States. And so I got it's kind of funny that it's like because, I kind of compare my job searches now, or I shouldn't say now, kind of leading up to this job, it was a lot easier. Like when I was first, it's like, I guess once you get that first job and once you, I guess, proven yourself, it's a lot easier because like I didn't have to apply for 114 jobs, and get to wait for the one offer. I got like 7 or 8 offers to figure out what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. And Chicago's just seemed like the best place. The most diversity. Cost of living was manageable. Even though my dream still is to eventually be in California because I just love it there. Practicality says it's a place like Chicago is easier for cost of living and things like that. And I had the opportunity to be a director for innovation over an entire school. And so that's where I'm at now, Jim's World Academy here in Chicago. And it's right downtown, which is great because one of the things that inspired me from the University Innovation Fellows was being able to go to the different companies like the Google or the Facebook to see how like a real design setting is in a work environment. And that's something that always stuck with me and something I always thought that every student should have. And so having a school that's downtown, like Google's here, Facebook's here, Twitter's here, Amazon's here, and I've been able to connect with those companies there and design an experience where we can go and get a tour, meet with the actual employees who work there, ask them about their day, ask them about their path, because something that you learn is like not everyone takes that traditional path from I'm going to a 4-year school in this particular major and that is how I ended up at a Google, or also when I was able to do a Silicon Valley trip, take my students here to Silicon Valley, and they got to visit a place like Pixar. And I had a student who really wants to work at Pixar when she starts her career. And so to be able to hear someone's story about how I got denied from Pixar like 3 or 4 times before I finally was able to make it there. To be able to hear those type of stories, see that see that type of setting, is very it was inspiring for me when I got to do it, and I'm able to bring that to them as well, which has been great.
I'm really so happy that you landed in a geography that you love and at a school that you love, and really talk about the best blending of your capabilities. I think I have 2 last questions, and one has to do with, as a parent and as a school committee member, I'm keenly interested in how public schools democratize access to these kinds of experiences. Technologies, yeah, many of them are acquiring maker spaces, and teachers, it's a slow road, but teachers are being trained in how to use them and how to weave it into the curriculum. But what would you say about what teachers can provide their students now in terms of access? How might they be as bold as they could possibly be in exposing K-12 students to what they need to know in order to access those careers?
Right, and that's sort of my next step because I'm still at a private school. I'm still at a place where the budget is big, so I'm allowed to experiment with whatever I want. And my thought has always been, what's the next step? So you think about, I always look at the Tesla model. When they first came out with Tesla, it was this $130,000 car. Sports car that only a few people would have access to and be able to buy. Then slowly they went to the Model S, and then eventually their goal though was the Model 3, which is sort of what everyone could have. How can you make it manageable and accessible for everyone? And so that's sort of the way I've been looking at it. I'm at these private schools that have all the access to all this money, but then how can you make that same type of experience accessible for everyone? And I don't know yet. That's kind of what I'm thinking about now, because you still need the funding, and that's why I'm glad that due to COVID and due to kind of this move to remote learning, like these public schools are able to see that the kind of the gap between what their students have access to and what others have access to. So I was just reading recently that here, the Chicago Public Schools are collaborating with the internet providers to provide high-speed internet for all students, any student in need for the next 4 years, which I think is big because, especially times like this where you have to rely on remote learning, you need high-speed internet, especially if you have multiple kids in one house and things like that. So I'm really glad that now people are focusing on this equity and, making sure every student has a laptop, every student has, high-speed internet. You have to start with that first, the basis, before you can then say, okay, now how can we get every student a VR device, or how can we expose more students to artificial intelligence or cryptocurrency? Then now you can start to design those types of experiences, whereas before, you can't. So you have to get those bases out the way first, and then 3D printers are really cheap. Like the best 3D printer now that I have in my lab is only like $250, and it works better than the $2,000 3D printers that I have in my lab. So, as the cost of these technologies come down, like we have to expose students to these. So, every school needs to have sort of like a innovation space, a maker space, a design space, and they're not expensive anymore to put together.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, I really appreciate what you're saying about there's a hierarchy of needs. Let's get the students who are at home internet, high
Mm-hmm.
speed internet, so they can have Zoom calls and do some basic things. And then all those other things, prices come down. It is pretty unaffordable. It's pretty affordable. And the thing that really strikes me is that you can bring that Pixar person right onto the screen. And
Exactly. Yeah.
while it's not the same as being at Pixar and being inspired by all the things that they have there, still it is providing access to students who may not have ever been able to go on that trip.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings me to my last question. What would you say to the young Black girl or boy, Black or brown or indigenous, but an underserved minority? What would you say to them as they look at this career path that you have so elegantly pursued and achieved? What would you say to them at this onset to keep in mind as they as they think about, like, COVID and learning from home and all the challenges that they're facing today?
Right. I think the one thing that I was missing from my journey was a mentor, and we were kind of talking about that earlier. And that would be what I would recommend. It's something I wish I had. You don't have to go through this alone. Go through career path, career finding. Some of the issues, especially in urban schools, is that you might have one college counselor to like 500 students, and so it's very hard for everyone to kind of get assistance with where do I go, what do I do, what am I interested in. So I would recommend like finding a mentor, finding someone in a field that you are interested in getting into, especially if they're a person of color, a woman, have some sort of similar demographics as you, and reach out to them, tell them what you're interested in, what questions you might have for them, like get advice from as many people as you can for your career, because it'll make it a lot easier, because people who have made mistakes in certain areas or can then help you not make those same mistakes, and help you kind of forge your own path, and realizing that it may change. Obviously when I went into college, I thought I was going to do one thing, and it's changed 4 or 5 times, and it probably will change 4 or 5 more times. I think we're in the type of society we have now. It's just, a lot of the jobs, you don't stay at them for 20, 30 years like you used to. And, you know, like for even I think about my kids who are 8, 6, and 4, like a lot of jobs they might have access to haven't been invented yet. So which is kind of, you know, scary to think about. So you know, it's just like the sky really is the limit now. You really have the resources available to kind of achieve anything you want. So, you know, you just have to do the work.
Greg Wilson, thank you so much for your time today and your inspirational words. Your path um, is continuing, and I'm just really excited to see what you do next.
Mhm. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Talk with you again soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye bye.